You know me from the forums as Mr. Create. And first off, I want to say thank you so much for having me. I'm super geeked to be able to be a part of this week's workshop, especially on a day like today. Cross-site copy paste. Oh my goodness. My mind is blown. All the possibilities, being able to create components in your Webflow project and then take those components and share them amongst other projects. Oh, too awesome. Super exciting day. Super excited. So happy to be a part of today. Today on this week's workshop, if you're new here, we create these workshops in order to perhaps share something with you new and to help you get past some of the limits that you perceive that you might have. And in this week's workshop, we will be talking about how to create a hero image with a blur effect. All right. So imagine you have a website. You only have a couple seconds to grab the attention of your user, and you want to have something that not only is slightly different, but is also intriguing, that allows your user to come back and want to use your services. So what we'll be doing is we'll be creating something like this. Nice. So as you can see here on the left, we have a very large hero image, but also there's a blur effect on that far right side there. And that blur effect, and we'll quickly talk about the build of it. So the way this workshop will be is we'll go through how to create this effect using the CSS3 blur filter, then also the structure of the project, and as well as the positioning. And to quickly give you an idea of the structure, it will contain a section that has a background, and then we're going to utilize actually a mask that is 50%, and then within that mask we're going to have a second background that has the blur effect. Just to give you a quick idea, I know it might be hard to imagine what that is, so we'll jump into our project. Before we do that, again, just to reiterate, the way this workshop will go is we'll go through the build, and then after we complete the build, we'll take a few questions at the end, maybe 5 or so, and then we'll end after that. Alrighty, again, thank y'all for joining, and let's jump into our project. Awesome. So as you can see here, we have a completely blank project. The only thing added into this project is our background image. So what we first want to add in is our section. We'll name this section L section. And this is where we'll first add in our background, but before we do that, we want to make sure that our width is set to 100 VW or viewport width. Then we'll have a height of 100 VH or viewport height. So now it completely covers our viewport. Then we want to have position relative, because the next item that we're going to have added is within this parent element is going to be the mask, and the mask will be position absolute. So before we get to that mask, we want to add in our background image. So we add a background image, set it to cover, and then we want it to be centered. Almost there. All right, now the next thing we're going to create is the mask. Again, you may have seen something like a mask within our elements in the slider element. That's how you have the items come outside of the mask and into view. So what we're going to do first is add in a div element. We'll give it a name. Let's name it C blur. Then we'll give it a width of 50 VW because we only want it to be half. Then we'll give it a height of 100 VH. But as you can see, it's only on the left side. So we want to give it a position absolute and then push it to the right side. Awesome. Now we're getting close. The next thing we want to do is add in our image. So we're going to grab another div element. Oh, I skipped and missed one thing. So again, like I was saying, because this is a mask, C blur is the mask, we need to have it overflow hidden. Because again, the next image that we're going to add is going to flow outside of this parent element, but we only want a portion of it seen. Okay, so we've added in overflow hidden. Now let's go back to our div block. And we'll name this div block C blur underscore underscore image. Awesome. And we're going to give this settings of 100 viewport width and 100 viewport height. But as you can see, because of the parent element, it's only being sequestered or put into that one portion or that one half. So in order for it to fill outside of that, we want to do position absolute, full. It's still stuck within the parent, and in order for it to overflow outside of it, we'll do negative 100%. So now it fills the entire viewport, even though only a portion of it will be seen because of the mask. Now here comes the cool part. We're going to add in our background. Same background. We're going to give it the same settings so that it mirrors the previous background. And then finally, we go down to our filters, and there is our blur. Oh, pretty cool. Let's bring this to life just a little bit more. Let's add in some text. So first, I'm going to add in a text wrapper. Let's name it C blur underscore underscore text. And I want this text to be centered, so let's use flex, vertical, and have it centered. But as you can see, our text box is sitting behind our image. So what we want to do is give our C blur image a Z index of 1, and we'll give our C blur text position relative and a Z index of 2. Awesome. Now everything within this text element I want to be centered, and I want the text to be white. Awesome. Now let's start adding in some text. We got our heading. Let's add in a paragraph text, and let's add a button. Pretty cool. Now it still feels a little weird, so let's add some padding. How about 5 rims to both sides? Oh, now it's looking good. Let's add a transparent button. So we'll style this button transparent button. We'll change the color from the default blue to transparent. Then we'll add a white border. Awesome. So that is how you create a hero image with a blur effect. Pretty cool. So if you have any questions, feel free to provide them within our chat, and I'll be happy to get to them. Thank you, Chris. Thank you. Thank you. And if you want to know, this solution and this question came from our forums. It was initially asked by Max Lab, and the answer was also provided by Aaron Campo. He provided a different solution, but they both work just as well. Feel free to ask any questions. I'll be happy to answer. So we have a question about receiving some Webflow swag. I'll definitely reach out to the team to see what we can do. Thank you, Donald. Thank you, Donald. So, to give you an idea of why I gave the classes those names, hopefully we'll be able to provide a article here in the near future, within the next week or so. So I gave them these names because it follows the BIM naming structure. Oh man, this has greatly increased my productivity within Webflow, and actually has helped me create more modular designs. And this will be great, especially with cross-site copy paste. So as you can see, L section, to give you a rough understanding of the BIM naming convention, you can have kind of a name class. And my name class starts with L. L is for anything that is a layout. C is for anything that is a component. And the C underscore, anything that is an element of that component, receives a double underscore and then a name. And then if you have a modifier, you give it a double dash. And hopefully I'll be able to provide an article about the naming structure here in the near future. Great question. What does it look like in other screen sizes? So as you can see, we can manipulate it however we like. So if right now it continues to remain 50 viewport width, and I would suggest once it gets down to a mobile that we make some changes. So now we're here in mobile. I would suggest changing this from 50 to 100 so that it completely fills. And then we will make sure that our blur effect, there you go, fills as well. So then it degrades down the same. Good question. So if we shorten up the mask from top to bottom, so again, the way that the mask works is just like the slider. So the question was, what occurs if you shorten up the mask instead of making it 100 viewport height? So C blur was the mask, and if we shorten it, let's say to 50, it shortens it up, and you can use any type of, you can use pixels if you like, you can use percentages. I use viewport width so that it responds just a little bit more easier on different on different screen sizes. Oh, thank you. Can't see the screen. Sorry. See here. Awesome. So the question was, what occurs when you change the height of the mask? So as you can see here, the height is now 50 viewport height. You can use percentages or pixels as well. And it also, because it's a mask, you can place it anywhere. So because it's a mask, it is literally sitting on top of that background image that is position absolute, and you can move it anywhere you like within that position of the parent element, and it will still retain that blur because the blur is actually on that background image. Thank you for letting me know about my screen. Thank y'all for being so gracious. This is my first time, so I definitely appreciate it. Oh, let me see the questions here. So question number 1, why can't we just put in a div and put blur on it? Why does it require you to superimpose the same image on top of the other? Great question, Goku. Great question. So the reason why is because the blur effect is actually affecting the image itself. So if the reason why you need the mask and need an additional image is because if you put the blur effect on the original image, it would blur out the entire image. If I only put the blur effect on the mask itself, so say for instance, I completely hid this background image and put the blur effect on the mask, it would not only affect the text here because it will blur the text, but it would not affect the background image. So as you can see, it only affects the elements within that that parent element. So as you can see, the text elements are blurred out, but the background image is not, because that mask would only contain that background element. And this might also be pretty cool for any type of dynamic information. Like, say for instance, you have a dynamic image, you can easily call it within the same way. Thank you, Brian. Thank you so much. I'm super nervous, to be honest, so I definitely appreciate y'all. Different screen sizes, definitely. So the next question was from Fu, and he's asking about different screen sizes. All right, so if I change this back to 100 viewport height, as you can see, an iPad looks still pretty good, but I would suggest once we get to mobile that we change it to, instead of 50, that we change it to 100. See here, make my change to my image as well. 100. So now that we're on mobile, it doesn't need to move outside of the viewport. So then we change this to 0, and now the entire background is blurred. Again, you can move your background however you want because it is position absolute. And then the grades down here, you can change the padding if you like. I'd probably make it less, maybe 2 rims instead of 5. And this is how it degrades. Let me see questions here. Is there any way to soften the blur edge like a gradient? Ooh, that is a great question. This question is from Chucky Phipps. Great question. I am not sure about that. Creating a gradient type. Let me see here. Let's look into our blur image and into the filter. My initial answer would be no, but I imagine there's a hack around it. They only have like a radius that you can add more blur or less blur, and not necessarily a gradient effect. To have a gradient effect, I imagine you would maybe need to create perhaps some type of PNG or SVG type of layout that would overlay, and that it would blur and then kind of fade out. That would be my only suggestion. Thank you, Jay Food. Thank you so much. So the next question from Webflow or Nelson: if the second image was black and white, would the mask contain the black and white? Yes, that is correct. And we can actually see that here. So if we add an additional filter and change all this to grayscale, the image that is being shown within that mask is the additional image that we have here on our background. So the way it is structured, our first background image is the section. It is the entire section. So say for instance, if you had, let's make this like a real hero image. So let's make it 50. And we'll also have to make the C blur 50 as well. So as you can see, you would have to do the exact same to both in order for them to mirror each other. So because they're two different images, or not two different images, because they're two different elements of the same image, anything that you utilize on one would have to be mirrored on the other. Is there a way to do that blur on hover? Great question, and yes, there is. Let's say, for instance, we wanted to have this blur effect occur, how we just say on this entire blur section. So we will take our C blur image and we'll take off the blur effect. And then we'll change the state to hover, add the blur effect, go back, add transition, we'll just say all to make it easy. ease. And as you can see, when I hover over, it changes the blur. Changes to blur. Great question. Great question. And Michelle asks, how does it work on mobile? So again, like we talked about, you can resize your mask to fit wherever you like. So then when it degrades down to mobile, you can make it have whatever. You can make it 100% or 100 viewport width, or you can have it still stick to the right side. Anything that you like. Let me change this back so that we're back to our original. And add the blur. Awesome. And the next question was, what pixel size background image do you suggest? That's a great question. Thank you, Nelson. So it all depends on how large. I definitely overdid. You can even see within my assets that probably will say, yes, very large. So my image is 4,500 by 3,000. I would suggest having a background image of the size of the largest viewport that you might have. And I would say no wider than maybe 1,400, to be honest. And then you can adjust the height the way that you like. The reason why I'm suggesting that is because, first off, many viewers, their largest screen is around 1,400 pixels, right? And also, the background images don't receive the responsive image that Webflow provides in regards to providing multiple variants. So in order to not have a large or long load times due to background images, you would want to make sure that they are created correctly, that they're not large images, and also that they are within the correct size. So I would suggest no larger, no wider than around 1,400 pixels. Bart, you are absolutely right. Definitely. It is always better to specify the transition to what's actually changing instead of saying all. Definitely. Thank you. Let me see. Any more questions? Feel free to ask. Hey, Brando, thank you for joining. Hey, Sonia, thank you for joining. And Bart, again, thank you for providing that insight, and thank you for joining. Feel free. Any more questions? So if there's no more questions, let's see. I think we got one more. Nope, we got them all. Awesome. Bart, thank you for providing that insight. Awesome. Okay, let's close out this week's Webflow workshop. Again, thank y'all so much for joining me today for this week's Webflow workshop. Definitely humbled, super honored. Again, workshops occur every other Tuesday at 10 a.m. Pacific time, and in between those are our community live streams that also occur at 10 a.m. Pacific time. If you want to join our community of friendly developers and designers to show off your latest Webflow project, share tips and tricks, or get help on your designs, feel free to go to the forum at forum.webflow.com and introduce yourself. You'll find me there. Again, my name is Mr. Create. And also, if you find any answers to your question on the forum, please pay it forward. I cannot tell you how much that has helped me and so many others. Pay it forward, help others, share it with someone else so that we can all grow smarter together. Again, this stream happens every other Tuesday, 10 a.m. Pacific time. And do not forget, feel free to reach out to us at Webflow app on Twitter as well as Instagram, any of our social media, and feel free to present any additional ideas that you would love to see on the workshop. We would love to hear from you, and again, I'm so grateful and honored to be here. So from here, I want to say thank you, and let's go out there and make the web beautiful. Thank you all, and hopefully I'll see y'all around. Have a great one. See ya.